Welcome to One Brothas Mind, and I am KD Smooth. Today we will question and challenge popular information and views from a B1 perspective, while we expose the real facts you need. We do this to strengthen your logical, critical, and discerning thinking skills. Because in today's world, hard choices are mandatory and they come with consequences. So you need all the information. And at One Brother's Mind, we do this from a B1 Yeshua the Christ follower's perspective. Now, if you're not ready, you better get ready with Katie Smooth at One Brother's Mind. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's Katie Smooth coming back at you with a new report. I pray you all are doing well. Shalom, family. In today's report, we're going to discuss this issue. Our next installment in our systematic white supremacy series here at One Brother's Mind. Medical racism is training the solution. Yeah, we're going there today, family. Some new developments have developed where many states, the nurses or RN licensing organizations in many states are now requiring structural racism and implicit bias training for nurses to maintain or renew or get their nurses' licenses. Yeah. So we're going to dig into this issue, family, briefly. But before we do, again, smash the like button, share this report on all your social media with all your peoples, and be sure to be subscribed to One Brother's Mind, where we try to bring you the information and facts you need. Okay, again, this is our fifth installment in our new series here at One Brother's Mind, where we are highlighting various formats of systematic white supremacy. You know, the stuff that's baked in the cake, and to my white listeners here, individually, no, you are not responsible for systematic white supremacy. It's not a condemnation on you as an individual person. But what it is a condemnation on the system that so-called white people in the U.S. and in many other places around the world have built into the system. The system runs as a well-oiled machine without much help. The system of systematic white supremacy. It doesn't require most white people's hands-on help. So when so-called black people are having a conversation with you guys, and we're talking about or make reference to systematic white supremacy, we're not pointing the finger directly at you. We are highlighting the system that's in place, the rules, the laws, the requirements, and on down the line. Okay? There are white supremacist, racist systems that are in place that are designed to achieve a particular outcome, particular treatment, and purposes against so-called black people in the U.S. and in other places. Now, with that said, most of our white brothers and sisters in the U.S. and other places actually do play a role in supporting systematic white supremacy by supporting the legal system, the laws, the politicians, the rule makers, as they continue or make worse the various elements of systematic white supremacy. So many of your elected officials that you love so much are the very ones that are implementing or at least maintaining the systematic white supremacy aspects that are still in play. So that's the primary way that our white brothers and sisters support systematic white supremacy. But in today's report, we're going to have a short clip, and I'm going to share with you in the clip a brief description of what medical racism looks like and how it affects so-called black people here in the U.S. And then we're going to get into a recent development. As I said, Kentucky, Michigan, several other states are now requiring implicit bias and structural racism training classes for all nurses to renew, maintain, or get new nurses licensing. So one of the questions I have just before our clip is, do y'all remember this? During the so-called Black Lives Matter movement, yeah, many of our white brothers and sisters was at least visually taking a knee. They were all in support. They was all for the cause, right? But as I said to many during that time, this is all just fluff for most. It's all just fluff. It doesn't really cost them anything. They don't really have to do anything. Come out, stand in line, hold hands, take a knee, whatever, hold a sign. That doesn't cost them anything. That doesn't cost them any of their white privilege. It doesn't cause them to have to make any adjustments with how they are treating people, especially so-called black people. They don't have to change anything. It's superficial. And for many, unfortunately, for far too many, that's exactly what it was. So again, we're going to start off with our clip because I want to be sure to highlight and give you an example of what systematic white supremacy and in the form of medical racism actually is, and its effects on so-called black people here in the U.S. Okay, so we're going to start our clip right now.
Hundreds of analyses show that black Americans are less likely to receive pain medication than white Americans reporting the same level of pain. This is true in big cities and small towns, across socioeconomic class, and for many different kinds of pain. It's even true for children suffering from appendicitis.
Essentially what we found was when children were presenting with similar levels of pain, black children had 80% lower odds of receiving opioid medications compared to white children.
The simple truth is we see some people's pain differently. Psychologist Kelly Hoffman and colleagues found that many of us, including medical personnel, implicitly hold the false idea that black people feel less pain than white people. From simple paper cuts to slamming a hand in a car door, the same injury was judged to be less painful in her experiments when it happened to this Sam rather than this one. And this is a bias that affects more than just how we see others' pain. It can also impact how we treat it. The medical students and residents who showed the greatest bias when they did this task were not only more likely to endorse false statements, like black people have thicker skin than white people, they were also more likely to make inaccurate treatment recommendations for black patients. Now, remember, these experiments aren't studying explicit bias. After all, these are doctors, a population of people who have pledged to do no harm. But no matter who we are, hidden biases in our minds can influence what we see and then how we act. So let's talk about solutions. When it comes to pain management, Professor Mahzarin Banaji has an idea for hospitals: an in-the-moment intervention.
You type a painkiller that you want to prescribe to a patient into your electronic system. Let's say codeine. Your software should return a little graph to you that says, please note, in our hospital system, this is the average amount of painkiller we give to white men, this is the average painkiller we give to black men, for reporting the same level of pain. You're the doctor, you're the expert. Only you can decide what is right for your patient. But it is important to do so with awareness of the pattern of bias in your own healthcare system.
This carves out a moment for double-checking decisions. Sometimes a well-timed reminder is all we need to outsmart our minds.
Okay, family, there you have it. That's just a real quick, brief example of what medical racism looks like and how it impacts so-called black people here in the U.S. and many other people of color as well. One particular thing within that clip that I want to highlight, though, is where the solution idea they presented. They wanted it to show up, pop up a graph on the computer to remind the doctor, hey, here's, our history of medical racism in regards to this prescription and how we prescribe it differently to different groups of patients. I don't think that goes far enough, because in that example, you're still leaving the decision up to potentially the biased or racist doctor or what have you, right? Instead of having it, it's okay to have a graph pop up to say, hey, here's where we've been racist in the past, but then the next option should be the doctor should have to input or have previously inputted the patient's pain level, and the software should then take over, or the AI in the software, if you will, should then take over and say, okay, based on this patient's pain level being an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, you must prescribe this painkiller drug at this amount in this dose, where you remove the doctor's choice in the matter. For the most part, you totally remove it. But if the doctor still wants to have a different quantity or dosage amount prescribed, then the doctor could click a particular, button on that requirement that says but basically an exception button. And then the doctor has to type in why they want to make an exception to the proper or normal prescription dosage and amount to this particular patient. And it has to be justified. They can even have people on the other end, someone on the other end reviewing the exceptions as they come through and also approving or disapproving the exceptions. And many of you with a medical background, you understand that as a way of eliminating errors and what have you within the medical community and medical processes, especially in hospitals, they have multiple levels of accuracy checking. Some have 3, some have 5, some have more, where there's multiple different people verifying You got the right patient, the right name, the right birth date, and you're doing the right service or procedure, uh, administering the correct drug or what have you. There's a whole chain of checkpoints. Why couldn't this be the same, to have at least two, maybe three? So either the physician has to follow what the recommended or the required prescription amount that removes and eliminates any racist bias that may be in that physician. And then the physician still has the power to implement an exception, but they have to explain why. And then that exception has to be reviewed by someone totally separate from that position and agree and sign off on that. Because the goal is to treat and administer care equally amongst patients, regardless of what group of people or race of people or whatever, regardless of the differences. That's the goal. It's the whole goal of this initiative, right? So I believe that that software, or at least that solution idea, doesn't go far enough, but it's a start. Okay, so let's move on. Like I said, in Kentucky here recently, this is an article that I'm going to share some highlights from with you today. In Kentucky, there's Michigan. I've seen about 4 or 5 states, and in my understanding, this effort is basically going to be implemented nationwide, where, as you see on your screen, Kentucky is requiring nurses to take training on structural racism, and they call it white splaining, but it's actually implicit bias. This is actually an article that comes out of, it's kind of popular right now on the web, because it's the article itself is biased on the against this effort side, right? So I actually want to share some excerpts from this article, because if you're not reading and paying attention and even listening to people's opinions and views that are opposite of your own family, you the one messing up. You missing out, because you don't know what, so to speak, your adversary, or at least those who disagree with you, you don't know what they think or how they feel. And it's very important to stay up to speed. Even if you disagree, at least listen, so you are fully aware in all ways, okay? So this article comes out of the Washington Examiner, and we're going to go over a couple highlights and go from there. So it starts off, the Kentucky Board of Nursing mandated nurses to take an implicit bias course. Let's see here. They're taking an implicit bias course to recognize the history of racism in healthcare and threaten discipline for failure to do so. The ultimatum to complete the mandatory continuing education training, which was developed by the Kentucky Nurses Association, forces nurses to complete the training by July 1st, 2023. They pretty much, one nurse said, we all are guilty of being racist. And we need to examine the way that we take care of patients and change our behaviors, because we are giving substandard care, Rebecca Wall said, a Kentucky certified registered nurse, anesthesiologist with 40 years experience. Rebecca, yes, most so-called white people, our white brothers and sisters here in America, you guys are racist. Mostly, you were raised that way. It's because of, one, your parents and what they believed and taught you, but also the systematic racism. The system, this entire system is racist. So you can't grow up in an environment that's racist and not also have racism within you and within your belief system, unless you really went way out of your way, you and your parents went way out of your way to learn and function completely opposite of the system. So my point I'm making here is there's a lot of our white brothers and sisters that totally believe they're not racist. They have no racism in them whatsoever. Right? But if they spend enough time around having conversations, discussing topics and whatnot around so-called black people, basically what would happen is they will start to say things and share things, opinions and views that black people will be like, ding, there you go. That's racist, what you just said, or that opinion you just expressed. And usually when black people do that, our white brothers and sisters immediately recoil and conversation is over. They don't want to hear it. No, allow me to explain it, because for you to still have that racist viewpoint, no one has ever explained to you why that's racist, or you've never listened. So I got time today. Let me break it down to you. All right. And hopefully after hearing the explanation, you will consider it and potentially change your view on that. But unfortunately, the majority of our white brothers and sisters, not all, are they're just stuck. They don't see it. They're totally blinded to it. Most of them don't care about it because it doesn't affect them. There's no negative impacts on their lives. So they like, whatever, go somewhere else with that. That's the general perspective for most of our white brothers and sisters, okay? And it's also why it's remained operational for over 400 years. It's not so-called black people that need to change anything. We can't. We're not that much in control of the laws and rules and systems here in this country. You are, my white brothers and sisters. Y'all are. Y'all are the majority, at least so far. That may change here in a couple of decades, but y'all are the majority, right? Okay, so the article goes on further, says the training presented by the KNA, the Kentucky Nurses Association Board of Directors, Treasurer Erica Bradford, and some other lady, you guys can go to the Washington Examiner and read it, told nurses that best intentions will not solve implicit bias in healthcare. So thinking you have no bad intentions, you think you're trying to treat everybody the same and be fair and all, you can believe that all you want, it's not going to fix it. It's not going to change that so-called black people here in America are getting racist medical care and treatment that are having significant impacts on our lives, negative impacts. Okay? The article goes on and says, in order to lead to meaningful change, any exploration of implicit bias must be situated as part of a much larger conversation on racism and bias. An opening slide in the training presentation states, one slide showed a large picture with Ku Klux Klan members burning a cross. Okay? And some of the nurses felt offense to having to see that and watch that. And in their minds, they're being compared to that. Okay? But the reality is, if they take a moment, white supremacy and racism is on basically operated on a scale. There's the far extreme on one end and the less extreme on another end. So the slide that they were shown was the far extreme, the white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, the white nationalists, and all that. And many of those nurses, like this one here, took offense to being compared to them. It's like, I'm not like them. I don't believe what they believe. Okay, great, fine. We're not saying you do. We're making a point that there's a scale. Okay? And in many cases, the scale on the least extreme side is where most racist healthcare officials fall. They're not out wearing hoods and marching with tiki torches and all that. No, they're on the least so-called racist side of the scale. They're in positions in healthcare, education, corporations, in positions of being responsible for hiring staff. You just go down the list, and they're in those positions. And yes, most of our white brothers and sisters still have certain amounts of racism or implicit bias within them. And they call it here unconscious bias or what have you, where they're not even conscious of it. They don't believe it's there. They don't believe they have it. So they're just operating, and what's happening is it's coming out in their decision making. And in this example, in medical treatment, less pain medicine, or you're not experiencing as much pain as, say, a white person with the same condition or injury, right? That's how it's coming out, which is making so-called black people suffer more. Okay, let's continue. So this nurse said she had to make a decision at that point when she saw the Klan slide as to whether or not she was going to bite the bullet and agree with the assumption that they had, which was that they were all racist, the nurse said, who she said immediately decided to complete the course. And then she went on to say it was a struggle professionally to decide whether or not to finish it. I get it, but this is our systematic white supremacist reality. Most of our white brothers and sisters, not all, have implicit racist biases, whether they want to call them conscious or unconscious. This is the environment that y'all were raised in, whether it was at home with your parents or just overall. So while it's not impossible to not have those, it's extremely difficult or extremely rare for there to be some white brothers and sisters who don't. You can't. It's like you're saying, well, I'm walking underwater, but I'm not getting wet. It don't work that way. The water is the systematic white supremacy and racism that's been in this country for over 400 years. And you can walk through the water of that, but you don't get wet by it. It doesn't impact you. It doesn't affect your thinking and how you treat other people, whether you're doing it intentionally or on purpose. That's basically what you're saying. Yeah, you, my white brother says, that's what you're saying. It's almost impossible. You can't walk through a pool of water and not get wet. You can't walk through a whole environment of systematic white supremacy and not have some implicit bias or racism within you that you need to work to try to rid yourself of in your family. Okay, so let's go on. The nurse went on to say it's offensive to be told that if you don't do this course or this training, your after 40 years, you're out. A whole career spent in a field with implicit bias racism in most cases because you don't agree that to that one dogma. Okay? You're done. You're valueless. You're not worth it anymore. No, if you're not going to accept the absolute fact you cannot walk through water and not get wet, you can't. You cannot live in a white supremacist, racist system for over 400 years and not have racist biases. As a white brother, it's almost impossible. One of the ways you can do it is if you're a white brother and sister and you say you were adopted or some kind of which way like that, and you were raised actually by black parents in a predominantly black neighborhood from a very early age. There are a few people that have had that experience, and they'll tell you, "Oh, it's night and day. I see everything that my black brothers and sisters are saying, and I'm doing everything I can to educate and talk to my white brothers and sisters and explain this to." There's plenty. Well, I won't say there's plenty. There's several white brothers and sisters that's out here doing that and been doing it for years. Okay, but let's go on with the article. Another nurse of 39 years and a program manager at the medical advocacy group Do No Harm told the Examiner that discipline could mean the non-renewal of a license. The nurses organization disputes that licenses were being threatened, that the implicit bias training is required by regulation, considered and passed. That came from the Kentucky General Assembly Committee, adding failure to do it could result in a civil sanction or discipline. The training coincided with the licensing renewal period. A diagram of overt racism, which is the spectrum or scale that I spoke of a moment ago, and covert racism was included in one slide that suggests a white woman asking a black woman where she is from is covert racism. Yeah. Unless you hear an accent of some significance, there's no reason to ask a black person where they're from. There's no justification for it. Okay? There's a whole bunch of questions. Can I touch your hair? Can I just all kind of stuff that our white brothers and sisters ask us, so-called black people, that is racist. If something comes up missing, usually they blame the black person or the black staff member. Or did I say the black nurse, the only one that's on staff? They'll blame her or him. And it's covert racism because it's a bias. That person had nothing to do with whatever came up missing. Okay, let me get through this article because it's gonna take me all day. I keep talking. Examples of overt racism include overt racism. This is the extreme part. They include lynching, painting swastikas, and public harassment of persons of color speaking other than English. And there's a whole bunch more examples of overt racism. This is right in your face. We don't care. This is what we're going to do. Actually, many of you also recently saw what happened there in Alabama at the riverboat docks. That was overt racism, where those white brothers and sisters that were there refused to submit to a black man, the co-captain of the riverboats. We all thought he was just a security guard. No, he was the co-captain telling them what they can and cannot do. So here we're going to show you, black man, what happens to black people that try to tell us what we can and cannot do. That was overt racism. And yet, the police there in Alabama and the FBI, they sitting there trying to play like, oh, it wasn't a hate crime. Oh, it was clearly a hate crime. Clearly. But I digress. Covert racism, which is on the other end of the racism scale or white supremacy scale, which is seemingly not as bad. On that end of scale includes white silence. That's white people hearing and witnessing racist things happen and not saying nothing about it to the white person that's doing it. Not speaking out against it. Not taking action. Standing up for your so-called black brothers and sisters, or your Hispanic brothers and sisters, or your Asian brothers and sisters, whatever the case may be. They just sit there and don't say nothing. That's racism. You're literally, by not speaking out, you're supporting the system. Your silence is saying, yep, okay. Yep, that's fine. And it's not. Okay? Another one is denying institutional racism, which is another way of saying denying systematic racism. It's in the institutions. It's baked in the cake. It's baked in the systems. And it has to be rooted out. In some efforts like this type of training. Okay? There's only one human race. Denying white privilege, bootstrap theory, which is a joke. Well, let me speak on that for a second. The bootstrap theory, for those that don't know, that's where most of our white brothers and sisters complain to so-called black people and say, well, you know, the reason why y'all struggling and don't have nothing is because y'all won't pull yourselves up by your own bootstraps and work hard and build nothing. That's one of the most racist. Like, if my white brothers and sisters don't ever say nothing like that to nobody black, whether you believe it or think it or not. It's one of the most racist things you ever said. We've built our own towns, our own cities. We've had our own banks in this country after slavery. And every one of them, your people, came, attacked us, and destroyed what we built out of pure hatred and jealousy. Every word of them. A quick one you can research is Black Wall Street. That's pretty popular right now. Or Tulsa, Oklahoma. Right, that's one and the same name. It's gonna lead you to the same information. But that's just one. There's hundreds of stories like that throughout the history of the United States. Another example, can't talk today. Eurocentric screw criteria. If all the test questions are questions that focus on a Eurocentric culture, questions and information, things that basically white people experience, if you give that test to so-called black people or so-called Hispanic or Asian peoples, of course they're not gonna do as well on that test if that's where all the questions are Eurocentric. Because we don't know, just like y'all don't know our culture and our information as well, we don't know y'all's. Even though y'all educational system has completely tried to consistently force feed y'all information to our children. Most of it is not true. Let me say that up front. Most of it is lies. And then the rest of it is stuff that has no value to us in most cases, other than just to be aware. Again, this is why I'm reading from this article. to be aware of what my white brothers and sisters feel, what their opinions are, how they think, even if I disagree. Okay? It's important to know that. All right? I wish more of our white brothers and sisters would review our reports here at One Brothas Mind or various other black B1 social media reports and news reports that are out there. We're all over the place. Don't just go on social media and see somebody black talking and go, okay, this is it. No. B1, Black First news media or social media. Only those. Okay? There's a difference. The rest of them are coons and sellouts. But anyway, another, I digress again. Another example they gave was weaponizing whiteness, which is exactly what those ladies on the Alabama riverboat dock attack hate crime did. After they did the attacking of the first co-captain black man on the dock, when the rest of the black people came to help defend him, all of a sudden now, especially those white ladies, they want to, I didn't do nothing. It's okay. Leave me alone. No, you get a chair, and you definitely get a chair. Anyway, let me move on. Fetishizing things, claiming reverse racism, excusing white-splaining racism, and many more. The article goes on to say, according to the training, racism can be a contributing factor for so-called black people to hypertension, mental health problems, low birth rate, and prematurity, heart disease, diabetes, increased body mass index, depression, anxiety, stress. Just go on, because it's all stress. You're under oppression. Being under consistent oppression is stressful, and it's going to manifest on the people that are being oppressed in a variety of different ways. And in this article, it's highlighting some of the medical and physical effects that medical racism have. Because think about it. Okay. Think about it. We for the most part, there's nowhere else for health care that we can go in the U.S. Think about it. Or I'll put it this way. Imagine if, my white brothers and sisters, if you lived in Wakanda and you got to go to the Wakanda hospital. It's just you. There's no other health care, no other options, nowhere around. And your life is hanging in the balance. How comfortable are you going to feel? Exactly. That's our experience. We've been stuck in the land of our captives this entire time. This entire time. We're stuck. Okay? So just, the article goes on with some more. The rest of it is mostly the biased part. But, so I ain't going to go over that. But it goes on further with some more of its views. But like I said, it's always helpful to at least listen and read or hear the opinions of, people who disagree. So that's where and how you're able to have dialogue. Hopefully healthy dialogue where, the truth can be explained. Okay? So with that being said, family, many of our white brothers and sisters, especially those in nursing across the country, are doing this. Yeah, they are mad as fire to have to do this training, to have to go through this process and hear and listen. They don't want to hear, they don't want no parts of this stuff. And I mean no parts of it. They are lit. It's amazing how angry the devil gets when the devil is not allowed to continue to be devilish. Yeah. All right, y'all. So with that being said, let's focus on some solution efforts in like this training, which is basically white people teaching other white people. Which here at One Brothas Mind, I've said that the entire time. In all instances, that's pretty much, at least at this part, one of the best ways of tearing down systematic white supremacy and racism is white people, or our white brothers and brothers and sisters teaching first. Start in your own home with your own parents, with your own kids. That's the first place to start. Root racism out within your own home first. Then once you do that, you and your family members start addressing things, not practicing white silence when you're out amongst your peers. Start pulling them to the side and having conversation with them. You know what you just said in that patient's room? That was kind of racist. What do you mean? And explain it to them. Because if somebody black does that, they're not going to listen in most cases. They're going to be offended, and the conversation is not going to happen. So the problem is going to remain. You understand? Okay? But start in your home first and then branch out into the workplace like they're doing here with this training. In the schools, law enforcement, it's been over 400 years, y'all. I put it this way, I'm not holding my breath, but do what you can as a non-racist white brothers and sisters. Do what you can, okay, to have an impact. That's what you can do. Many times y'all ask, what can I do? Do that. You out, you see somebody being racist and disrespectful to the McDonald's worker, the Hispanic lady or gentleman, or the black worker, they practically cussing them out. Step to them. Shut it down. You don't talk to people like that. You don't treat people like that. You want to be respected, you treat them with respect. Yeah, they may have messed up your order, but they're going to fix it. Just tell them respectfully, and they will fix it. Things of that nature. Also, most of our white brothers and sisters here in the U.S. especially, most of y'all believe y'all real good white Christians. So let's look at the biblical Christian scriptures that if y'all are good white Christians, that y'all should be living by, right? Y'all should be practicing. How about Luke on your screen? Chapter 6, verse 31. Do unto others, or to others, as you would have them do to you. Or it's usually said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's really that simple, right? Treat people how you want to be treated, no matter who they are, right? Now, here's the nugget. Many of our white brothers and sisters, especially the ones as you move down closer to the extreme part of the white supremacy scale and racism scale, the further you move down, the secret is most of those white brothers and sisters are already treating people how they want to be treated with their racism. And I say that because that's one of the reasons why they keep doing it. They feel like they have to, because they do it and their ancestors have done it, that if they allow so-called black people to come to power, that we're going to treat them the exact same way they treated us. That's many of our white brothers and sisters' fears. So they feel like they just, okay, so we can't change nothing because they're gonna get us. They're going to do us the same way we done them. And Not that individual, there may be individual cases here or there, but as a rule, Yah's chosen people, we're not built like that. We have too much humanity to do that. And again, in the good Christian scriptures, the scripture says, vengeance is Yah, says the Lord. Okay? Vengeance is mine. It's not ours. We don't have to do nothing. Yah's going to do everything when it comes to judgment that needs to be done. We don't have to go out of our way to do nothing to those who hate Yah's chosen people. Right? Okay. So if you're actually doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, you will be treating people with these type of characteristics that is on your screen, with love, with being humble toward people, or with humility, being a servant, being honest, courteous, long-suffering, sacrificial, forgiving, selfless, compassionate, empathetic, and understanding. That's how you will be treating your patients. Or in other words, treat them like your mama or your daddy is the patient. That's who you're caring for. I know for some people that's still not good. That would be bad too, but not talking about them. But in general, treat them like they're your relative, your brother, your sister. Treat the patients like that. Stop seeing people as other. They're a human being. We are all human beings alike. Right? But like I said, many of our white brothers and sisters are not going to do that. They're going to continue to be racist, to be white supremacists, see people as others, and treat people differently. But they're going to still claim they're good white Christians. Good white Christian folks. So if they are, let's look at the scripture, some more of their Christian scripture here in Matthew chapter 25, verse 45. When Yeshua is responding to people who called themselves good Christians, and Yeshua says, then shall he, speaking of Yeshua, answer them, saying, verily I say unto you, insomuch as ye did it not unto the least of these, ye did it not to me. In other words, insomuch as you did not do the previous things, this stuff, to the least of these, and in this example to so-called black people, you did it not unto Yeshua the Christ. And he goes on in other places of scripture after this is like, depart from me. I never knew you. You're not a part of me because you don't treat people, or you never treated people consistently like this. So you didn't treat me like that. Okay? All right. And again, even when Yeshua tells them this is going to be their reaction, they're going to, well, that's not fair. I'm going to call the police and tell them that a black Yeshua is standing here threatening my life and my salvation. That's literally what some of them are going to do. They're going to pull out their cell phone on the day of judgment and try to call the police, y'all. Oh, Lord. Anyway, yeah, even the dog. Yeah, what? So there you have it, family. Just wanted to do a quick review of what's this new issue of this training that's going on, and it's being required to maintain your RN's license. Y'all let me know what y'all think on this subject in the comment. Let's chop it up and kind of go from there. So, yeah. And this concludes this broadcast for One Brothas Mind. We thank you for joining us, and as a part of the new Black media, B1 choices are mandatory, and being on code is required. But never fear, Yeshua the Christ is with you always. Shalom.